Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor, and for today's video I'm going through all of the books that I read in August. August was a very good month for me. It was the NEWTS readathon, which really inspired me to read a ton more books than I normally do. I ended up reading 15 books, which is definitely higher than what I normally read in a month. And for the most part, all of the books that I read were really enjoyable reads, which is always a really good sign. Now, as you can maybe tell from my voice, I do have some residual yuckiness left over. I was sick for pretty much an entire week now at this point, which is why this wrap-up is coming to you guys a little bit later than what I normally like to have my wrap-ups be, but it's here and we've got a lot to go over, so I'm trying not to make the intro super duper long. So let's get started. I'm first going to go over all of the books that I read in August that didn't count towards the NEWTS readathon, and then I'll get into my NEWTS TBR and what I completed and if I passed my NEWTS. Spoiler, I did, so I'm feeling very good about that. So let's get on with the books. The very first book that I read this month is We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and I read this one on audiobook. It was about 40 minutes long, so not too long of a book. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. This is definitely like an introductory sort of essay in terms of feminism and modern feminism, and I did enjoy it. I did think it was a little bit short. It could have been expanded upon, and if you do consider yourself a feminist, you probably know it all already, but it was interesting to see Adichie's experiences because she is from Africa, and there are definitely some issues that are not as prevalent in the United States where I am from, so it was interesting to see a little bit more of a different culture's perspective on feminism, and it was a really short read, so I do recommend you pick this book up, especially with the audiobook is like 40 minutes long, so it's a very short listen. The second book I read was Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson, and I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars as well. This is kind of a memoir. I think the subtitle underneath the book is a funny book about horrible things, something like that. I don't actually have a physical copy because I read it as an audiobook. I really enjoyed this one. I do suffer from anxiety and then anxiety-induced depression, so I really identified with this book a lot. For me, humor is something that I use to cope with my mental illness, and this was just an incredibly funny book. I definitely think you can relate. Jenny Lawson has anxiety, she has depression. I think she also has, I might be remembering this wrong because it was very early on in the month, but I believe she has OCD disorder as well. So this was just very, very funny, but also very heartwarming too. I actually don't know a lot about Jenny Lawson. I do believe that she is a blogger. I did actually get a lot of recommendations from people that also deal with anxiety or depression, saying that this book was wonderful and it really made them feel seen and less alone, so I picked it up and really enjoyed it. So I definitely will look for more of Jenny Lawson's work in the future. The next book I read was Teen Titans Raven by Cami Garcia, and I ended up giving this graphic novel a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Raven is one of my favorite superheroes, definitely in the DC realm. She is up there. I used to watch Teen Titans on Cartoon Network very religiously as a child, not the one that's on now. No. I'm going to be one of those old people and say my version was better. The remake is trash. Not the live action one. I haven't seen the live action Teen Titans, but I'm talking about like the new cartoon. So yeah, I really enjoyed the old cartoon of Teen Titans, loved Raven. I just absolutely adored her as a character, and this is the first in a series about the Teen Titans, kind of introducing them, rebooting that franchise a little bit. I enjoyed this one. I will say I did give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars because I feel like there's nothing new here. It's an origin story, so there's not a lot to be said about story. It's more building up a character and developing Raven's backstory a little bit. This was really well done. The artwork was wonderful. It was in like a purple and gray scale kind of format, and it looks like the next book in the series is going to be focusing on Beast Boy, so that's really exciting. I am going to continue on with this series because I am interested in seeing, I'm sure the first 5 editions are just going to be setting up each of the Titans, and then hopefully they're gonna get together and it's going to be more of like a traditional comic book storyline from there, because this was very character driven, not a lot of plot, but the illustrations were wonderful. The next couple books I read, I'm going to lump them in together because this was Snot Girl Volume 1 and Snot Girl Volume 2 by Brian Lee O'Malley. The first volume I gave a 3 out of 5 stars, and the second volume I gave a 2 out of 5 stars. This is about a blogger named Snot Girl. That's not her name. I just forget it because unfortunately this is going to be kind of a forgettable series for me and I'm not going to be continuing on, which is unfortunate because the artwork is wonderful and it's just, the characters are so kooky and they're all bloggers, and it's kind of like a critique, a fun critique on blogger and, you know, the very social media centric culture that we live in, and creating like these Instagram celebrities and everything like that. And there's like some creepy murder mystery stuff thrown in there as well. This is very hard to follow. I gave the first one 3 out of 5 stars because I didn't think I was going to pick it up until like the last 10 pages of it, where there was a cliffhanger and I needed to pick up the second one, and it was very, very choppy and disconnected. And unfortunately, even though there are still mysteries that I would like to know the answers to, and the artwork is wonderful, it's just not enough for me to continue on with the story. But I definitely recommend you pick this up if it seems intriguing to you, because this is very cute. The artwork is wonderful, and I think if you're the kind of person who likes focusing on that and doesn't necessarily need a super strong story and just enjoys like light, fluffy characters with some darker things mixed in, this could be a really good fit for you. The next book I read was Bitter Harvest by Anne Rule, and I did end up listening to this one on audiobook. I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. The only other book that I had read from her before this was The Stranger Beside Me, and that's the Ted Bundy book that really pushed her out into the world of true crime and really established her as a powerhouse in the field. This one was definitely not as good. I think part of the reason why The Stranger Beside Me was so wonderful was because she did have that insight about actually knowing Ted Bundy as a human. This one didn't really have that, but it was interesting to listen to as an audiobook. I'm a really big fan of true crime podcasts, so I did feel like maybe audiobook would be a good format to try and listen to some true crime books, and I wasn't disappointed. It was very good. It was a little bit on the shorter side and pretty good for a road trip if you like that sort of thing. I did listen to it on a road trip. Again, it's been a while, so I forget the main woman's name, but it is about a woman who you find out at the beginning, so it's not a spoiler alert by any means, but unfortunately she sets her house on fire with her children inside and ends up killing 2 of them, which is horrible. And it goes into, you know, kind of why this woman would kill her children and the events that led her to do that. And this is very, very dark, so trigger warnings for that. Just the nature of true crime. You do have some deaths. They don't shy away from details. This is just really dark, and there's not a lot of uplifting things that come from it. One of the things I do like about true crime is I do enjoy reading true crime about things that impact laws or impact legislation, or, you know, kind of make a change for the better even though something awful has happened. This didn't really get into any of that at all, so, you know, there's nothing uplifting in here. It is very interesting from a psychological point of view, and I am really interested to kind of read more from Anne Rule and see what her other books are like. This was a very solid read, and if you enjoy true crime, you'll probably really enjoy this as well. Now we're getting into books that I actually have physical copies of, so editing me is kind of breathing a sigh of relief now, but the last book that I read that was not for the NEWTS readathon was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is about a girl named Jules Larson. She's down on her luck. She really needs a job. She just got kicked out of her living situation and lost her job, so she really needs something. She finds this ad on Craigslist for an apartment sitter. When she goes to the apartment in question, she discovers it is the Bartholomew, and that is one of the ritziest, most alluring, mysterious places in Manhattan, and she gets hired on as an apartment sitter to essentially just live in the apartment and get $1,000 a week for doing so. Things start getting really weird really fast. Apartment sitters start going missing, and Jules has to figure out the secrets and mysteries behind the Bartholomew, figure out what is behind these young girls going missing before she becomes the next missing apartment sitter. This was very good. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. Riley Sager is always good for a very fast, very page-turning thriller. I read this in a day and a half. This was very good. You don't want to put it down. This is an ode to Ira Levin's Rosemary's Baby, so if you enjoy that, you'll probably enjoy this. I was hoping this would be a little more paranormal, a little more supernatural. That's not really how Riley Sager operates, though. His books so far have been pretty standard thrillers. There's no like paranormal elements, and he's quickly become an auto-buy author for me. There are some things that I think could definitely be improved upon. I would like to see him actually write from a male's point of view, because I just think there are some things that, you know, are kind of lost, just because all of his books have been about female protagonists, and there are some things that are kind of like, that's not really accurate. There's like a weird sex thing in every single one of his books that could have been done without, but I mean, other than that, it's very good. I would like to see the next book maybe feature a male protagonist, but other than that, really solid thriller. Now moving on to the NEWTS readathon, I wanted to be a librarian. That was the career that I decided to go for in the OWLS stage of this readathon, so I had a pretty sizable list of books to read. My TBR changed quite a bit from the beginning of the month to the end of the month, but I did manage to get them all read and to read some books that have been on my TBR for a long time that I've needed to buckle down and read. Here's my bullet journal spread. That is what I am referencing for this next part of the video. So my career was librarian. I completed that, so I'm a magical librarian now. That's pretty cool. The NEWTS that I had to complete were Ancient Runes. I needed to get an O. Defense Against the Dark Arts, I needed to get an E, and then History of Magic, I also needed to get an E. So going down, starting with Ancient Runes. For the A level, that was read a friend's recommendation. And for that one, I read Kingdom Come by Mark Waid. This is my boyfriend's, one of his favorite comic books. So that was his recommendation. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. This is a darker comic. This follows the Justice League in humanity's future. It's very, very bleak. Superheroes have kind of given up on humanity and kind of left us to our own devices. There's a lot of mayhem, and it's up to these big player superheroes like Wonder Woman and Superman and Batman to actually decide to pick up the cape again and fight for the future of humanity. Very dark. Alex Ross illustrates this, so it's got that super realistic style, like the detail that goes into the illustrations, very, very cool. I don't think this is going to be one of my favorite comics, just because the purpose of me reading comic books and graphic novels is they're supposed to be kind of more like filler for me in between the darker books that I tend to read. This was very dark, so if you're looking for a fun little story about people wearing tights and capes, this is not it, but this was very good. Ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, and this is a one-shot, so would recommend this if you're looking for a darker superhero tale. This is one of the best. E level for Ancient Runes was read a book written in past tense, and for that I read Mindhunter by John Douglas and Mark Olshaker, and I did have a weekly vlog where I read this one, and I have a lot of thoughts on it. This is the inspiration behind the TV show Mindhunter. I'm still going to watch that. I'm looking forward to watching it still. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Still looking forward to watching the TV show. I think it's going to be even better than the book, just because the parts that were actually on criminal profiling were 5 out of 5 stars easily. I think behavioral science is so fascinating, and the aspects behind that were incredible, and I wanted to read more. The parts that John Douglas writes himself, and his opinions and viewpoints that he sprinkles in throughout the book, 2 stars. Did not appreciate. Doesn't really seem like the best person in the world, and I don't really want to get into it here because I did have a vlog where I did get super in-depth with it, and I really don't want to discount the wonderful things he has done and all of the criminals that he has caught and put behind bars. I really just did not vibe with the narrator of this. So this was 3 out of 5 stars. Kind of disappointing. I think this was probably the most disappointing book that I read this month, just because when I bought this, I was thinking that I was going to give it a 5 out of 5 stars or a 4.5, something like that, because I'm very big on true crime. It was like an avenue I wanted to pursue at one point as my career, and this just didn't do it for me. So 3 out of 5 stars. I'll probably also be unhauling this because I'm never going to read it again. If I want to read something similar, I will look in a different direction. The O level for Ancient Runes is read a book that has been on your TBR for ages. And for that, I read the Book of Dust by Philip Pullman. So I actually don't have a star rating for this one yet because I'm still trying to ignore the nostalgia behind Philip Pullman and his world that he's created and kind of try and review this more critically than I have done his books in the past. I will say for me, just as a nostalgia, this is 5 stars. I loved it. I don't know, I'm probably gonna give it like a 4.5 stars just because I was kind of hoping for a little bit more action. So this is the new series that Philip Pullman is coming out with. He wrote the His Dark Material series, so like the Golden Compass, Subtle Knife, Amber Spyglass, that series. This is the companion series, and this takes place 10 years before the Golden Compass takes place. So Lyra is actually in this, and she's a baby, which is kind of disappointing because I wanted it to be adult Lyra, but we're getting that in the next book that comes out in October, so that's really exciting. There's not a lot I can actually say about this book because while it is a prequel, it does rely very, very heavily on you having read the original series to really understand this book. I will say I loved the 2 of the main characters. Malcolm was such a sweet little boy, and the other character I'm not going to mention because I did think it was very neat to see a character that you only see briefly mentioned in the original trilogy get mentioned in this one and actually be a pretty badass character in her own right. I'm very glad that I finally got to it. I bought this when it first came out. I have a first edition of it, and I was just so worried because I had heard some not so great things about it. The Golden Compass is one of my favorite books of all time, and I really just wasn't looking forward to reading this if it wasn't going to live up to my expectations. So I did put this off for quite some time just because I was nervous that I would hate it, because I would not know how to cope with that if I didn't like this book. I did, thankfully. So 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was very, very great. It brings you back into the world, into kind of a different view of the world. You're very focused in one section, not jumping in between worlds and universes like Lyra. But this definitely sets up some more behind the scenes slow burning action that is going to be propelled into the second book. I hope Malcolm's in the second book. I know adult Lyra is going to be in the second book, so I'm looking forward to picking up, I think it's called The Secret Commonwealth, when it comes out in October. So my camera overheated, so if it looks a little bit different in terms of lighting or angle or anything like that, that is what that was. I believe I was on Defense Against the Dark Arts A level, and so for that one, I read Strange Weather by Joe Hill. This is read a book that is black underneath the dusk jacket. Strange Weather by Joe Hill. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. This had 4 short stories in it, and they all have to do with some sort of weather event inside of the book. So like I said, there are 4 short stories. The first one was called Snapshot, and that is about a camera that takes away people's memories. I ended up giving that one, I believe, a 2.5 out of 5 stars. The second one was called Loaded, and that was about a shooting at a mall and whether or not the good guy was actually the good guy or if he was actually one of the bad guys. And I'm doing quotes because it's a lot more complex than that. I gave that one a 5 out of 5 stars. That was insane. The third one was called Adrift, and I think I gave that one a 3 out of 5 stars. That is about a man who goes bungee jumping and lands on a cloud, but that cloud is not what it originally seems. And then the third one is called Rain, I believe, and that one is about nails that rain from the sky in Denver, Colorado, and kind of like apocalyptic what happens to that town after rain becomes nails instead. And obviously there's some impacts on the world with that sort of weather event, and it's kind of exploring like grief and loss and how to pick up the pieces and move forward in that new world. I gave that one, I believe, a 4.5 or 4 out of 5 stars. This one, so overall, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It was very good. Joe Hill is a wonderful writer. And this was my first short story collection I've read by him, and I will be picking up more. He has a new one coming out at the end of this year, which I'm excited about because this was really wonderful, and even the ones that I didn't really give the highest rating to were still very wonderful in terms of writing style. That wasn't what I didn't like about the stories so much, so definitely recommend picking this up, if not for the second short story, Loaded, which I think could have been a book all in its own. The E level for Defense Against the Dark Arts was the first book that you remember from the TBR, and so for that one, I read When the Sky Fell on Splendor by Emily Henry. I ended up giving this book a 2 out of 5 stars. This is about a group of teenagers in the town of Splendor, Ohio. They have a YouTube channel, and they're just kind of exploring at night when they see what they think is a UFO and the consequences that that has for their town and for themselves. I listened to this one on audiobook, and the audiobook was pretty wonderful. I really enjoyed it. This one just didn't do it for me. It ended up not being the kind of story that I thought I was getting into, and the twist ending, I just really came out of nowhere for me, and I absolutely hated it. So this does kind of give off Stranger Things vibes, I guess. I don't think there's as much, I don't think the friendship bond is as, like, strong or as impactful or as wonderful as the Stranger Things series, but there is that bond of kids, if you like that trope, very supernatural, paranormal. So if you like that, pick it up. It's a very short read. I know, scrolling through Goodreads, I am in the minority when it comes to hating the ending, so you might really like this one. I definitely have seen this one going around BookTube, so if you're still interested, I would definitely give it a try because it's a short read. The audiobook's not too bad. The audiobook is actually really great and probably saved it for me a little bit. That was this one, 2 out of 5 stars for that. So for History of Magic A level, it was read a fantasy book, and for that one I read the Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman. So before I picked up the Book of Dust, I wanted to reread the His Dark Materials trilogy. This is the 3rd book in that trilogy. It was one of the first books that I read this month. I listened to this via audiobook. I've already read the books physically many times in the past. The audiobooks are wonderful. They're narrated by Philip Pullman. They have a full cast. They're amazing. Highly, highly recommend. This was very great. 5 out of 5 stars for this one. I really can't give anything in the His Dark Materials anything less than that because it's one of my favorite series. Like, it's up there. It's like on the God tier level. Like, Harry Potter and His Dark Materials are my favorites. So yeah, I absolutely adored it. I cannot say anything about this pretty much because it is the 3rd book in a series. If you like high fantasy, if you like battles of good versus evil, if you like conflict that's more intellectual and theory driven rather than like swords and shields fighting, this is definitely a good series for you. I absolutely adore it, and I want to pick it up again. I'm excited to read the 2nd book in the new series coming out, where we see adult Lyra, who is the protagonist in the series. I cannot wait to see what happens after this series, because if you know, you know the ending in this one. So heartbreaking. My little child self never got over it, so I'm excited to see how Lyra got over the ending herself. And then the last prompt was E level for History of Magic. That was read a book that includes a map. I finally finished Prior of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. 5 out of 5 stars for this one. This has 2 maps in it at the beginning. I'll just show you that one because it has beautiful artwork next to it. This is about so many things. I mean, it's a whopper of a book. It's like 800 pages long, so whew, I clocked in a lot of pages this month. It was insanity. This is an epic high fantasy. 5 out of 5 stars. It's very feminist. It's very woman driven. I think there are like 4 or 5 different main points of view in this. 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 of them, however many there are women. There's only really one main male protagonist, which is awesome because high fantasy, it can be hard sometimes to find one good, awesome female character, let alone multiple. So this is wonderful. It is about a land that is torn between the East and the West. One part celebrates dragons and reveres them, the other one not so much. They believe they cause destruction, and that is true. There are 2 different types of dragons. One that is revered. They're the water dragons. They're more of the Eastern mythology of dragons, and then the Western mythology of dragons in our world is the destructive dragons that kind of cause mayhem and want to bring the downfall of human civilization. This follows a dragon rider wanting to do what's best and follow her dreams of becoming a dragon rider and saving the world. We follow a queen and her queendom just struggling to keep afloat amid sabotage and different political schemes. We follow a woman who is sent to protect the queen as one of her handmaids and has to live a double life, where she has to kind of live this double life between what she believes, what she's learning to believe and love, and what to fight for. This is just wonderful. Highly, highly adore it. I know this was making the rounds on BookTube earlier this year. If you haven't picked it up yet, pick it up. This took me about 2 months to read, but it was a wonderful ride, and it's just... it's a wonderful world to dive into. I would love to see more of this world. This is definitely probably one of my favorite books of the year, definitely one of my favorite books of the month, but I feel like at the end of the year, if you check out my favorite books of 2019, I'm pretty sure this is going to be on there because this was wonderful, and it was a great way to close out my reading month in August. So there you have it, guys. That was all the books that I read in August. I managed to complete my NEWTS with 0 time to spare. I was reading up until the very last minute. I really should go back and like figure out the page count that I read this month because it was absolutely insane, the amount of books that I read, but there were so many good reads, which is very good because I feel like had I read 15 books and most of them would have been like mediocre or something like that, I definitely would be in a reading slump right now, but I am not. I am reading some wonderful things for September. I'm excited to share them with you guys because there are some good books, but I'm pretty sure this video has been long enough as it is. If you got to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like, leave a comment down below, subscribe, all that good stuff. I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye!